Welcome to the Marketing Trail Guide Podcast, Season 1, Opportunities in Crisis. I'm your host, Kevin Krusiewicz, founder of Marketing Trail Guide and fractional chief marketing officer for companies running on the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS. This is Episode 4, A Better Business for a Better Life, with guest Zack Swire. From lifelong entrepreneur to professional EOS implementer and executive strategist, Zack loves helping business owners break through their most challenging problems while creating stronger and more purposeful cultures. I sat down with Zack on May 1st of this year, and we talked about how the Entrepreneurial Operating System gives leaders one simple system and a universal language for running their whole business, so they can get more of what they want from it and make a greater impact in the world. So please sit back and enjoy my interview with Zack Swire. So Zack, I want to welcome you to the podcast.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for having me on. It's exciting to be here today and to talk with you.
Well, let me just cut right to it. What is EOS? What is the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and how does it help business owners and entrepreneurs, and what problems does it solve for them?
Well, simply put, EOS is, just like you said, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a simple set of tools, and it's based on real-world practical tools that have been around for a long time. They'll tell you, there's really no kind of new strategy or theory here. What we're doing is we're really putting together a system of tools that works for a business to help in three areas. And those are vision, traction, and really healthy operations. And that's what it's based on.
Okay. And is it designed for a specific subset of the market? Is it big business? Is it SMB? Where does it fit in the market?
Yeah, great question. It's as small as companies of about 10 people, upwards of around 250. Of course, there's some companies outside of that it works well for, but that's really the core for EOS.
Okay. And, I know there's kind of 5 key areas. You talked about vision and traction. There's data, right? There's people. Maybe you could kind of talk about the wheel and what are those components?
Yeah, that's really what initially attracted me to it. I had went out to do some executive strategy consulting with an IT firm in Southern California. And after like 45 minutes of meeting with the guy, he was asking for marketing help. And I looked at him and I said, hey, I'm not really sure how I can help you right now. Like, everything's so buttoned up here. And if you just do these couple things, you're probably pretty good to go. And I was pretty impressed. And he walks over with an orange binder. This orange binder is called the Leadership Team Manual. And I'm like, the first time I saw it, I didn't even know what it was. And he says, well, Zack, it's about these 6 key components of our business. And the reason everything's so strong is because we've been really honing in on those 6 key components: vision, people, data, issues, process, and traction. And so, me sitting in that chair, I'm sitting here like, okay, how have I not heard of this thing? And I took that to heart, and I thought, well, all right, I got to go home and read the book. This is actually just last year. I'm actually fairly new to EOS. I've been in marketing and executive strategy consulting for years. But when I read Traction, Gino Wickman's book, it was one of those things that immediately I realized, oh yeah, these are areas in my past businesses and where I've worked and consulted. I could see weaknesses that really, if we didn't address those, it was harder to focus on other things that we wanted to do. And so when we hone in on those 6 key components and get them stronger, EOS is telling you that's our main goal. Vision, traction, healthy gets there by saying we need to get greater traction on our business by honing in on those 6 key components. And so we can talk more about each of those or any questions you have, but that's really the heart of it, is improving in each of those areas.
Yeah. And so kind of like what you said earlier, these are not new ideas. It's a collection of tools. I think of it as a collection of frameworks that I use in my own business, that I use with my clients. So I'm a fractional marketing executive for companies that are running on EOS. And the reason I like to standardize around companies that are running on EOS and niche down, focus on just those companies, is it provides a common operating system, a common language, a common set of expectations, so that everybody's on the same page. Whereas for me, working from one company to the next, if I had to have radically different way of doing things with each of those companies, it would not make me as efficient as I can be with having kind of that same operating system. So all of the things that you have to do as a company and as a fractional marketing executive, whether that comes to what are your goals in this quarter, 90-day goals for the year, for a 3-year horizon, even a 10-year horizon. Those are things that marketing needs to understand and know. And if you don't have that mechanism, you're not going to be successful as a in-house or contracted marketing professional. You need accountability. You need all of the components, and I won't go into all of that now, but all of the components you need to be a successful entrepreneur and to have a successful relationship with your employees, with your contractors, so that you can get to where you want to go. So I feel like it's useful for almost anybody, but is there a group of people that, are there symptoms that come up where you think, oh, you as a business owner really should take a look at EOS in your business? Who's it for in that sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. First, just to hit your note on the idea of this being a universal language for the business, I just want to say, especially, and I've consulted some younger companies, really fun companies, and you go in and it's like, part of it is we have so many options today, right? So we got all these cool tools and apps, and I love them. I've got all these apps on my phone. I love testing out new things, but it's not a good way to operate a business when you go in and it's like, great, we've got this team on Trello, this one on Asana, this one's on Slack, this one's using Teams, and everybody's using different systems and processes, and we don't have anything universal, and it's just a lot of extra, and it's hard to find what you need, it's hard to communicate, and we need one simple system. And it's really, it's freeing. It's like if you watch that Marie Kondo show, the Con Marie style or whatever she calls it, where you go in and you clean out your closet and she teaches you how to do it. Like, we need to do that with our business. We need to go in and say, hold on, we've made it way overly complex. And so when we think about these issues, I think any of us can think about them. These are issues like, people issues, do we have the right people in the right seats? Things just like control issues or lack of control or those also tie back to people a lot of times. We might have issues with growth in our company or profitability. It could be loss of direction, or maybe it's just hitting the ceiling issues where we're everything we're trying, we're just not getting past that ceiling, and we can't figure out why. Well, a lot of times there's just really distinct reasons that, one, we're not operating clearly, or openness and honesty isn't there among our team, so we get stuck. How many times have you sat in your leadership team meeting, or do you even have effective leadership team meetings? I walked into one company one time where they had 2 leadership team meetings in the past year. Wow. They had no KPIs, and they were really struggling as a company, one, to communicate effectively. They didn't really have any methods of effective communication. Even simple things like files were a mess in the organization. So when you start to see it unravel, it's like, well, of course, yes, you've done some great things in the past, but you can't always just lean on that past too. I also work with family businesses as well. I'm also working with the Drucker School and the Global Family Business Group there. And you just see some of these issues that keep emerging. So whether it's a new young company and they're really eager and excited and have just really great people, and they're just trying to do way too much and it's really overly complex, or you've got this, older family business that's passed things down through generations and things are just kind of there and how they have been, and we can't change anything because we can't change it. These are the same issues that keep coming up. And so when you think about those 6 key components, it really does attack all of those areas. And every time I've sat down now to talk with somebody about it, they're like, yep, yeah, that's I can see that. I can see that with our team. And ultimately we can sit down and think, when I sit down in these meetings, do I have like a complete level of trust and openness and honesty with my team? And if I don't, well, then I have a pretty big problem. How am I going to grow this organization when we don't have that? And also too, why are we doing this? And I think of myself as somebody who started up multiple businesses before I got into this. What did I get into doing this business for? Especially as you get older and you realize, and like, okay, there was times I was away from my kids, who are the most important thing in my life, my family. And it's like, I look back and I'm like, okay, I was traveling and I was doing all these things. And as you pass those chapters in life, you look back and you wonder like, all right, so I created a cool business and I did these cool things, but did I balance it well? Did I enjoy it in the process? Did I really help a lot of people in my business and community? Did we create more opportunity? Did we do a good job? These are all things that are in our head. And I think most business owners are sitting there, not just worried about, making paychecks, but they really want to have a greater impact. And they also want to try to balance it themselves. And a lot of times what I found is, especially on the executive team, there's not a whole lot of this balance. A lot of times these guys are taking it home, these guys and ladies taking it home every single night. And I've been there and I've struggled through that. And so what I want to help them with is creating a better business for a better life, and that's where my heart has been in the last few years of how can we make sure that we're finding that balance? So if you have other things that are important to you, it might be getting on your bike and riding up the hill here. It might be, donating your time to the local food pantry, whatever it is. It's hard to do that stuff, or just go hang out and throw the ball with your kid when you're so consumed with all this little minutia of your business and you don't have a good system in place to manage it. That's the transformational effect of actually tackling this and saying, hey, let's get in and tackle some of these hard problems. But there is a solution for it. And that's why I got so excited about doing what I'm doing today.
Yeah. Everything that you're describing, I can see in the contrast between customers that I work with that are running on EOS and customers that aren't, which is why I've chosen to focus on those that are. It makes my job a whole lot easier and more effective. There's 6 areas we mentioned. We don't have time today to go into all of them, but maybe we can touch on a couple of them to get a little bit more concrete for people. So you started talking about vision. You started talking about kind of goals. Maybe we just kind of unpack the VTO a little bit and talk about, Vision Day, talk about how you begin to establish something as crazy as it sounds as a 10-year vision, a 10-year goal. And then how do you look at the 3-year picture, the 1 year, and then how that turns into, core values, 3 uniques, all of the components of the VTO. I'll let you unpack it, but tell us why it's such a great tool and what it does for the business.
That's awesome. I love that question because it really gets to the heart of one of the most core pieces of EOS. And it's something that you don't have to have an implementer like me to do EOS. You can read the book and get started today. You can actually do that. You could also become your self-implementer, and there's some tools online that you can subscribe to at the Basecamp online, and you can do it yourself. If you want somebody to come in, there's certainly value for that, and that's why I love doing this. But this VTO tool is really critical because as EOS implementers will say, vision without track.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
What does it stand for?
Oh, yeah. The VTO is Vision Traction Organizer. So just a fancy term. The reason we also have these terms just to say, we have our own language because, if you're in the military or in certain companies that do it really well, having your own language, it doesn't have to get overly complex, but then that's consistency. We can all speak the same language and it becomes part of our operating system for our business and that we all get to speak that same language. So VTO is just Vision Traction Organizer. And it's exactly that. It's basically 2 sheets of paper, one side or the other, or the software. One side is vision, the other side is traction. And as we say in EOS, vision without traction is hallucination. So I've been there. I have to say I have started a business in the past where I had a lot of great vision. We didn't get the traction and it was totally hallucination. So when I read that, I was like, yeah, okay, that one hit home. But what this document is really simple. And if you had what they call a 90-minute meeting where you get to learn about EOS, there's implementers like myself who go out and talk to your business about it. You can also go online, read the book, whichever. But you're going to learn about this tool. And on this tool, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at your core values and your core focus of your company. Your vision, your mission. We're going to get that distilled and make sure that the team is clear on that. Then we're also going to look at, like you mentioned, some will call it like your BHAG, whatever it is, your 10-year target, your long-range plan. And we're going to work backwards from there. So we're going to set that and say, okay, great. What does that look like? Why are you in this business? What are you doing it for? And then we're going to start working backwards. And then we're going to plan out, like you mentioned, what is our marketing strategy? And I'm a marketer. I ran a marketing agency, an ad agency, and so I love marketing. So I tend to dig in there a bit. And I have to say, EOS does a great job in really simplifying it, getting to the heart of it. There's only one little piece that I layer in, and I know everybody kind of has their own little thing. But as a marketer, obviously, this isn't saying this is your entire marketing plan, but it's going to get to the heart of your 3 uniques. Really what differentiates you. And there's some really great studies and stuff, and I've been part of some seminars with guys from TED Talks who do, analysis on the brain and how we make decisions. And it's really smart. Those 3 uniques really do work. And so nailing those down or having a guarantee, a lot of times, almost every business I've talked to, they don't have a guarantee yet. And it can be really simple. And yet that provides a lot of comfort for your customer knowing coming in. Maybe it's not a money back guarantee, but guaranteeing that you're going to be satisfied or you're happy or we're fully going to take care of you. So we set that. Then, like you mentioned, we go to the 3-year plan. So what does this 3-year picture, we call it a 3-year picture, look like? Mainly because we know we're not going to do this big, long analysis on 3 years from now. And you know what? And some companies do that. We'll sit down and do this plan and the strategy plan to get to 3 years out. Hey, a lot changes. Look what just happened with COVID-19. It's like, we don't exactly know what's going to change in the next 3 years. So what we do is we say, ultimately, to get to this long-range goal, what does it look like about 3 years from now? we're going to set revenue, we're going to set profit, and we're going to set a few measurables, and then we're going to basically paint a picture. We're just going to have some bullets that say, what does this look like? So if you sat back and I said it back to you and you closed your eyes, you're like, okay, I can totally imagine us getting there. Imagine if you get your whole leadership team picturing that. That picturing that is so critical. And it's the same. I have a good friend, Brian Clay, who is an Olympian, and he says, before you go out, it's that visualizing, he would visualize everything before he did it. And I remember hearing that when I was in sports when I was younger. And I always think about that with business too, because every business I started, I try to picture myself. I generally do it 1 year out, but I love that EOS says, hey, let's picture this 3 years out, because I want everybody on the team to be able to mentally think about exactly what this feels and looks like. Because once we do that, we all start to run the same direction. It has a lot of power behind it.
Now, let me jump in there real quick, and I'm going to segue a little bit into, no pun intended on that, but I want to run into Meeting Pulse a little bit, because this VTO, this Vision Traction Organizer, is reviewed in the EOS system weekly. And so we're getting into Meeting Pulse a little bit. Maybe you could talk about Meeting Pulse. You made the comment that one customer you worked with had 2 executive or leadership team meetings throughout an entire year. When you say meeting, sometimes people's skin crawls, right? They hate meetings or something like that, right? Because they've been in a lot of bad meetings. I now, as having gone through EOS and having customers that I work with that are using EOS, look forward to those meetings and feel like at the end of the meeting, so much got done, especially as a leader / manager, especially somebody who gets stuff done through meetings, because I require the hands and feet of people that report to me to get the things done for the strategy that I'm setting. And so that meeting time is so critical. Talk about the Meeting Pulse, how VTO, Quarterly Rocks, all find a place, as well as Scorecard and all of the other components find a place in that level 10 meeting format.
Sure. That's awesome. That's actually a perfect segue into the other side of the VTO. So just briefly, as you flip that VTO over and you go to the traction side, that's where we do get down to our 1 year goals. We also list out our rocks, and I'll talk about what those are because that's part of the level 10 meeting. We also talk about our issues. And so that's part of that document. And so when we're running our level 10 meeting, what we call in EOS is the Meeting Pulse. And the heart of that is what we call a level 10 meeting. And it's a different structure for running your meetings. It has a particular agenda. And part of that agenda is that there's a reporting phase. So before I tell you about how this one goes, I just want to say, how many times have you gone to a meeting, you sit down, maybe you're even a company that's like on it, and like you've got your KPIs and your scorecard, and you even have a nice little segue, but all of a sudden you're into the reporting phase and you're going over the scorecard. Oh, one of those numbers is off. And so-and-so, VP of so-and-so, can you give us an answer on what's happening there? Next thing you know, rabbit trail, side discussions, what happened there, what vendors, what partners, what solutions. Yep. Maybe this wasn't even a big issue, but all of a sudden, one little comment now turned into an hour and a half. We only had slated that time, and we looked down at our notes. We didn't focus on anything important for the day. Yeah. People hate meetings because that's how they're typically run. Yeah. So instead, what we do is we have a very tight structure on the meeting where when you go into the start of it, we have a reporting phase. We start with a segue and, 5 minutes, just what's going on? How's everybody doing? And then we come in and we do things like the scorecard. But all we do, we don't talk about them. We just say, are we on track? Or are we off track? And then we talk about things like our to-dos. Are we done? Or are we not done? We talk about our rocks, which are our 90-day priorities. And your rocks are set as a team. And then on that 90 days, we're checking in each week and we're saying, are we on track for our biggest priorities for the next 90 days? And by the way, those priorities and those 90-day rocks are things that are going to add up to your 1 year goals, that are going to add up to your 3-year picture, that are going to add up to your basically your big BHAG, your 10-year long range goals. So we think about it fluidly all the way through. And that's a big difference too in how companies are planning. So a lot of times we're not thinking down to that individual quarterly stage towards our longer range goals and actually connecting all those pieces. Now we're doing that all the way down even to your weekly to-dos, your weekly, bi-weekly to-dos, and they're listed. And then we drive accountability because you're sitting in a meeting and you're saying, great, was this done? Was this not done? Is this on track? Is this off track? And if it's off track, what we do is we simply say, drop it down to the issues list. And the issues time of the level 10 meeting is the time we spend most of our time. So what happens is, if we're reporting on things, we're going to call things out that are an issue. We drop them in. And issues aren't all negative. Issues are, good things, bad things, opportunities. It's just any issue we need to talk about. We have this issues list because before we dive into the heart of the meeting, we first prioritize and we say, great, what are the 3 most important things we need to talk about today? Now we have focus on the most important things. When we do, we now have a process for processing those issues. And that's the meeting that we met at, the IDS meeting, which is identify, discuss, and solve. Another acronym, IDS, identify, discuss, and solve. And it sounds easy, but it's not. I've gone through this with leadership teams where sometimes we get in the identify and we just identify. We got all these different ideas. We want to create new ideas, lots of discussion, but we never move to solve. We train teams and we work through the US process to actually get things done, get them checked off, come up with solutions. And then most importantly, we take really detailed notes and we assign to-dos and make them smart right there in the meeting. We don't move on until that's done. We check it off. Then we move to the next item.
Before you move to the next item, I want to talk about IDS real quick, because you mentioned a scenario in which you just you talk about the identify too long, but I've seen the flip side of that where if you don't have a solid IDS process, people are offering solutions when they don't actually understand the root of the issue, and so that identify part of the process is so critical, because it's really just getting real with one another around what problem are we actually trying to solve, and to get to the root. Because actually, if you can spend 60%, 70% of your time on that topic, on just the identify piece, you're way more efficient when it comes to discussing and solving it. And sometimes you figure out, this is a departmental issue. We need to move this down to marketing or to finance or something like that, or it's going to turn into a to-do very, very quickly. And so we've been talking kind of at the leadership level, but all of this cascades down into departmental, and there's kind of this miraculous continuity throughout the organization, because every department is following the same process, and so I just find it very, 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 very fluid, very, very efficient. But I cut you off there. Continue on the agenda.
No, it's great. You bring up a huge point on the other side of it, and that's one we face all the time. And you're right. Most of the time, what you write up as the name of the issue, you kind of write it as a headline, just a few words, is not the root cause. And so that's the very first step, is we ask, well, what is the root cause? We even write it down. Root cause, let's write it out. And that's one trick that not everybody does. Not every EOS implementer does too. And it's one thing I'll say today is stop leaving your meetings without good notes. It sounds simple, but how many times do you walk out of these meetings and then a day later, somebody else, your coworker's like, you know what, you asked me to do X, but I kind of forgot what we talked about. Or do you have that file, or do you know where this thing is? And it's like, you just sat together for an hour and a half. You didn't take detailed enough notes. It was all just said yesterday. But so many times we're not good at that. So whether you have a scribe or you train your team to get better, that's an area we all need to focus on.
And even something so simple, kind of in the conclusion asked part of it is, let's review to-dos. And then as you read through the list of to-dos, the owner, who's going to have to report on whether it's done or not done next week, has to say, got it, right? Which is that verbal confirmation that I own this. It's my responsibility, right? So if there's lack of clarity, it's up to me to get it clarified.
Absolutely. And I love the cascading note that you mentioned, because how many times do you have team meetings? I've even worked with a team recently who had great leadership team meetings, and they've used other systems, and they had a lot of the pieces, but they weren't sure how to connect it throughout the organization. And so the whole point is the way EOS is created, or tools like 90.io, which is a software, and I use it with all our clients, because what happens is as soon as these to-dos are done, they can easily be cascaded down to your marketing team or your operations team, because they're also meeting on a level 10 weekly, and it might be a little different. The meeting pulse is set up differently for every company. They might be 60 minutes or 30 minutes. You can adjust the agenda. Sometimes they don't need as long, but we still have a reporting time where we talk about our measurables, and we want everyone in the organization to have a measurable, everyone. And that goes back to a great story if you read the book, where they talk about, like, in the steel industry back in like the 20s, and this owner of the steel company goes in and he looks and he sees these, little steel parts, and he's like, well, how many of those did you produce today? And the guy says something like, I don't know, I produced 20. And so he takes a piece of chalk and he writes 20 on the ground. And then all of a sudden the guy in the next shift comes in and he's like, what's the 20? And he says, well, that's how many the guy in the last shift did. Next thing you know, the lowest performing location in their business started outperforming everybody else from one simple thing. Everyone having a measurable, being clear on that. How many times, and everyone in the organization, doesn't have to be 10 measurables. Actually, it's better to have less, but having something key that's adding up to what are we really working towards to do. Plus, it gives everybody a purpose and a voice. What I love about EOS too is that we ask everybody to be able to raise their hand and bring up issues that actually get processed and solved. I remember years ago in college, I worked for Rainbird, and it was a great company. It's in our town here in Glendora. They were, founded here many years ago, the sprinkler company. And they had just like everybody else, they have a box, and you put your basically your issue or your comment or whatever in there. Maybe not. It got to somebody. I don't know. I mean, that was kind of the old school way of doing things is you got this comment box and you put it in. Managers may see it. They may not. They may report back. This is a fluid conversation. The world has changed. The way we operate has changed. We should give our team members the respect to be able to have that conversation. Doesn't mean we're going to do every single thing they say, because also, we can't do that either. But let's have a healthy debate and talk about it. What's the root cause? And the great part is this doesn't always have to go right up the chain to the top, because now you got teams that are meeting. So you've got, this team with maybe your newest interns and some other people, and they're bringing up some great ideas that need to cascade up. But we have cascading going up and down throughout the organization on key issues, measurables, rocks, and to-dos. Yep. And that's what's so critical.
I want to talk more about, in a minute when we're going to take a break, but I want to talk more about accountability and the AC chart, and I want to talk about scorecards and get into some of the marketing measurables that we're looking at, that I look at with my clients. But we'll get to that in just a minute. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
From a very young age, I remember in 6th grade being taught in sex education that an abortion is just a woman's choice, and that's it. That's the only thing they teach you. It's not a baby. It's part of the woman's body, and she gets to decide whether it lives or dies. I grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts, in a very Catholic and supportive family.
My husband and I, Jerry, have 5 children. Veronica is the youngest. And I always told her, I know God has great plans for you. I had always told her that. In high school and even junior high, she had lots of struggles with anxiety and depression and problems in school.
I would just not want to get out of bed. I had no motivation to do schoolwork or be around family or friends. I kind of secluded myself in my room. It was Christmas Day of 2018. I was 16 years old. My boyfriend was 18 at the time. We had been dating for about 4 months. I felt that something was off with me, so I looked up some symptoms online and it was matching up with pregnancy. I went to the store to get the pregnancy tests, went home, I took one, and almost immediately the second line came up, which means that you're pregnant. I was just in disbelief at first. I was like, no way, I'm not pregnant, not me. A couple hours later, I took another one and also was positive. I have a very close relationship with my mother, so I decided to tell her first. I went up to her and I showed her the tests, and she had already had a feeling that I was pregnant because I was acting differently than I usually do.
I was a little bit shocked, but I knew that I would support her. We definitely have always been pro-life, and I knew without a doubt I would never want Veronica to have an abortion.
My boyfriend told me he wanted me to have an abortion. His first reaction was just that he was very afraid. I understood where he was coming from because I was afraid as well. I knew that he wanted me to have an abortion, and I felt pressured to do so just because I didn't want to ruin his life or alter his life in a big way when it's not something that he wanted. I actually went down to Planned Parenthood. I was put in a room with this woman, and instead of her talking to me about my options or resources or different ways I could get help, it felt like she was a salesperson and she was trying to sell me on abortion. That just didn't sit right with me, and I knew that that wasn't the place I needed to be, and that's when I went home and did my own research. I searched on YouTube, what is an abortion, and I came across Live Action's video where the doctor describes in detail at each stage of pregnancy how the baby is killed. I just felt so upset and sad after I saw that video. I just cried. I knew if I hadn't found that video, that might have been my son who was being described in the abortion procedures, and I might have gone through with something without knowing what I was truly doing. I knew that he was a person, and that he was alive, and that killing him at any stage of life would be wrong.
The truth is powerful, and I'm so glad she came across that.
My boyfriend saw that video also, and it moved us both, and we knew that we couldn't do that. My baby was over 9 pounds, so I had to have a C-section. They brought me in, and it was about a 30-minute process. The moment I heard him cry, I was just like, I couldn't believe it, and I was so emotional because it felt like it was a blessing that he was there, and I could have almost taken his life away, and I was just so happy to hear his voice. That's a moment I'll never forget, and I just feel blessed to be his mom. think a lot of women do choose abortion because they're afraid of the lack of support, and also I think they're just uneducated and not completely aware of what they're doing. Your pregnancy isn't just a blob of cells, it is a human being and it deserves to live. Don't be afraid. There's so many resources out there that can help you if you are pregnant. I had my boyfriend there with me. He's been a great dad. He's really stepped up. I've been helped by people who I didn't even know existed. I'm really thankful that I found that video and that I found the resources I did and that I have my son. He really saved my life.
Welcome back to the show. My guest today is Zack Swire. He's a professional EOS implementer. We've been talking about the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and I'm pretty excited about it, if you couldn't tell. And Zack works with a lot of clients to help them gain traction in their business. And some of the things we've been talking about, Zack, have to do with accountability. You know, this idea that in a regular meeting cadence or a regular meeting pulse, we're looking at measurables, and each measurable is owned by a specific person in the organization. I mentioned that I'm a fractional marketing executive that works with companies that are running on EOS. And so this gets very, very real, and it makes me a better marketer. So as a leader and as a manager, I'm not in there writing the copy. I'm not in there producing the videos. I'm not in there doing the work. But I need visibility into what the work is producing, right? And so I'm looking at measurables like ad spend, like leads, like revenue, like return on ad spend. Those kinds of measurables, those are very marketing-y type of measurables. There's other measurables for a finance department or for an ops department, something like that. But one of the things that I will tell you is that that's where my mind is at, and that's what I'm consumed with, because I know that in those meetings and at the end of quarter, the finger points at me. Kevin, how's our revenue? Kevin, how's our leads? Kevin, how's our ad spend, and what's our return on ad spend? And all of these things that I have to be accountable to, which really defines my value to the organization. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about measurables in different departments, how there's accountability and how the AC chart plays into that. Maybe even getting into right person, right seat.
Sure. That's awesome. You know, the accountability chart, or as many companies and most would call it an org chart, you know, we've got our own language against the accountability chart. And one quick note on that, the reason it's called an accountability chart is we want it focused on accountability, and we want it focused on the roles first, not the people. Most of the time we start with an org chart, we think about our people, we kind of plug in seats. But what we do with EOS when we kick this off, before we can get to setting measurables and making sure people are accountable, we have to check first, do we have the right people in the right seats? You know, good to great, right people, right seats.
Yep.
So we do an exercise with the team to check that. We build the accountability chart and we set it up by role first. And we think about what structure this organization needs, not what people we want to put in what seat. That's a big challenge. It sounds easy, but get everybody in a room and start thinking about that. Get rid of all the names. You put every role up. You think about the function in the organization, because it's really not that complex, yet we tend to make it. How many of these org charts do you have? Dotted line, weird line over here. Okay, well, that's just complex, and it's hard on everybody, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense most of the time. So we start with our visionary integrator, which is a little EOS language as well, and we don't focus in on titles. We don't have like CEO and VP and all that. We say visionary and integrator. Not every team has that. We could talk about those two roles in a minute, but you also have your head of sales and marketing, operations, finance, whatever they are, IT, all those core departments. Once we build that out, then we have to do a check, and we say, great, you know, we have a people analyzer tool in EOS. And basically what we're doing there is we're analyzing everybody in the organization according to your core values. And by this time, we've already set your core values. So if they're not the right core values, then you probably don't want to analyze your people by them, because you're not going to have the right fit. But what we do is we check and we rate everybody on the team, starting with the leaders. Are they a plus, minus, or a minus? If they're a minus, they don't exhibit that core value. And then we have to set the bar, and we say, are we willing to have people who are a minus on one of our core values? And then we actually force the issue to then go in and say, let's have those 30, 60, 90-day reviews or talks with those people to say, we need to see some improvement in certain areas if it's possible, or we have to make the hard decision of saying, you know what, maybe this person is just not right for that seat, or maybe there's another seat, but we have to take the right people, right seat issues first. It's really hard to have people be accountable to something when, one, They don't even know what their job is. They don't have a clear role or job description. They don't have clear measurables. So we got to start there. We got to get the accountability chart set. We have to make sure there is clarity on their seat. It doesn't have to be this big long page. What are the 5 key things you need from that role in the organization? You can all talk about that and create that in an hour. And if you can't, there's a problem with your organization. You need to understand the clarity of how you operate and what's required of each of these roles. Of course, we can get more specific in goal setting and your measurables, and that's great. But once we've done that, then we tie it back to having measurables for everybody in the organization. And in your level 10, you're going to have your scorecard, 5 to 15 measurables for the company, but you're also going to have that for the departments. So just like you said, you're going to be reporting that back up. And what we want to do is have the leadership team have more of a general picture of the whole company, basically so that, as we say in the US, if you ended up on an island and, you didn't have any connection to your company, and the guy bringing you a drink could bring you a sheet of paper with, 5 to 15 numbers, it would give you a complete picture on your business. And recently, I met with a company and they're an awesome company. They've been doing great things, but their scorecard had, 50 plus measurables on it for the leadership team meeting. I said, can you imagine doing an on track, off track in that meeting? How many, it's just too much. It's okay if you have that throughout the organization, because then you have different meetings and people addressing those. And if you have issues, they can cascade up and down because now we have a system. But we don't need to waste everybody's time looking that deep in a weekly meeting. But we do need to have eyeballs on these numbers.
Yeah, let me interject there on that. So one of the interesting distinctions to make on a scorecard, and how verbose that scorecard is lead measures versus lag measures. Every lag measure has its previous lead measures. And marketing, for instance, I've got 20 plus rows of measurables every week that I'm looking at, because if revenue's off, there's 5 or 6 or 7 things that was contributing to revenue in distinct steps that I need to know about. And so if the revenue number's not there, I need to isolate all those variables in each measurable all the way back, right? And so I need that level of granularity. But from a leadership and from a P&L standpoint and just kind of a high level standpoint, you don't need all those measurables. You need to know, how much cash on hand do we have? How much revenue do we have? What is our customer count? And every business is going to be different. But I think that distinctions is interesting, especially when you're deciding, can we pare down our measurables, our scorecard, to what's critical for the leadership team to look at versus departmentally what I might need to know as a CMO from a granularity standpoint or an operations or a finance standpoint.
Yeah, and even down to the individual person. And here's the difference is sometimes I think people get stuck in their head, well, we have to have this. I need to have these measurables. Okay, maybe you do. Maybe that's your job, and we actually hired you in your role to be in charge. Maybe you're the e-com director, and you're like, okay, actually I have 100 different metrics that I'm reviewing all the time because we're looking at how do we increase average order value and customer lifetime value and all these key metrics. Sure, go ahead. Look at all the things in social engagement. That's your job. Right. We want to see as a team when we're meeting, we're not wasting everybody's time looking at every little thing that you need to do every day. I'm also not going in to look at somebody on the line posting their part on every little thing they're doing. So what we do is we get disciplined to say we need those indicators at the leadership team level and even at the department level, 5 to 15, because we also need the same structure in that meeting. Sure. But it doesn't prohibit you from an individual in your role. If you need more and that's part of your job, well, sure, go ahead. That's just part of what you need to do. But we still need to be disciplined to saying, what are those ones that are really telling the story the most that we can also plan with? These are ones that we can make sure when we look at, we can start to predict better, because that's part of overcoming those, ceilings. If we're better able to predict our business, a big part of that is making sure we're clear on our measurables and what our business is looking like moving forward.
So somehow throughout the course of this conversation, we've managed to avoid COVID entirely, and this episode will probably drop, late May, early June sometime. It's being recorded May 1st, and so who knows what's going to transpire between now and then. But a lot of organizations are dealing with layoffs, furloughs, in other words, reduction in the AC chart department. I've seen material come out from EOS related to, is it called an inverse or a reverse AC chart, something of that effect, to plan for what it would look like to pare down staff. But I think making decisions, we're forced to make tough decisions right now, and everybody's dealing with that. What should I do? I mean, that's the question in various areas of the business. What should I do here? What should I do in finance? What should I do in people? What should I do with marketing? and marketing spend. Should I pull back? Should I hunker down? Should I all of this stuff? What should I do? Decision making is driven by good information and visibility into the thing that you're trying to decide about. And isn't that kind of what we're talking about right now? Like having a handle on what's happening in the business so that I can, as an executive or as a business owner, an entrepreneur, make informed decisions. So I'm not making decisions blind.
Absolutely. And there are certainly tools. You mentioned the reverse accountability chart, some cash flow planning tools. There's some simple things that we can do. When everything else is set, it becomes a lot easier to make those decisions and then execute. The other part of that there is executing. A lot of times we get stuck in indecision or we're afraid of executing. I've worked with clients on both sides, some who are actually doing even better right now because people are buying more of their products because they're home. And I've worked with others who, have had to look at layoffs or the PPP loans or whatever it might be. But when you've pre-planned and everything is clear and you have that clarity and you've done things like the reverse accountability chart is basically just setting it out and saying, hey, what if we get to have to reduce 50% of our staff and 30% or 70%? You basically pre-plan that out, build that accountability chart accordingly, and you've already got it set in your head. So if we start to get towards that direction, everything's just an issue. If we see an obstacle based on COVID-19, it's not just COVID-19, one big issue. Well, COVID-19 is providing both issues and opportunities for companies. That's right. Even companies I know who like local restaurants, and I have a good friend who runs an awesome little restaurant in Claremont, and his Union on Yale is a cool little spot in there, and it's like a pizza and other cool things. And so what he said is, I can't afford to have all the staff here right now during this time, and we can't really make the whole menu. So I just decided I'm going to do really great pizzas and cocktails. But an opportunity came out of that because at first you couldn't really send cocktails home. But then what's awesome too is other things are happening, enabling things to still make your business go. So, yes, it's not the same business as before. Yes, I'm sure his total revenue has struggled and it's been hard on the employees, but he's doing everything he can to overcome that and come up with creative solutions. But having your business solid and knowing what your numbers are and knowing how to step into that, you don't just step into it, not knowing, but through EOS or having that clarity on your business, it makes it a lot easier to make those decisions. And that's why he can still continue to do that. And on a bigger scale, some of these larger companies, they also have other issues and challenges they're facing that sometimes are out of their control. So having that reverse accountability chart or really detailed cash flow planning can help. The cash flow side of it's interesting because a lot of times what I've seen in companies is we just forget to do the basics. There's plenty of these documents. I've got one I share. It's like 90 tips on how to take a look at your cash flow, simply by sharing that with your executive team and saying, hey, everybody, go do homework for today and come back and share some ideas on what we can do. I've seen that literally within like 2 days. Oh, we just shaved $250,000 off because we asked for new terms. And we had even one where we had an internet contract from years ago and we were basically paying 5 times the amount that every new internet contract has. And it's already been expired and we're month to month. Nobody checked. It's just forcing yourself to go through those little hard steps.
Go look at it. Just go look at it. Yeah, go look at cash flow. Yep. And what are the cash flow drivers? I had a quarterly session with another implementer at the end of last quarter, and we spent an hour going through what the cash flow drivers are. And out of that exercise, we had to-dos that we were responsible for bringing to the leadership team within a couple of weeks. So absolutely saw that firsthand. And this was in an industry where maybe almost every industry is figuring out how to adapt, or should they adapt, or what does it mean to adapt right now. And this is an industry that is in a state, or a company that's in a state where face-to-face interactions are not happening at all, and their business relies on face-to-face medical interactions. And so we've had to pivot the organization to telemedicine, telehealth. And we didn't think, we thought it was going to take a year. Well, it hasn't taken a year. It took a couple weeks. So it's amazing what you can do when you realize that you have to do it. And I think because the organization was so systematized, so set up, they've been running on EOS for, I think, 2 or 3 years now. They had a system in place to be able to pivot very, very quickly. And so I've just seen the success of that firsthand. It's not a guarantee. Not all businesses will be able to do that, but I think it increases the likelihood and sets you up for success. What are you seeing in terms of adaptation right now? Where are you seeing businesses pivot, and how is EOS contributing to their ability to do that?
Yeah, it's really great. It's funny. We'll have to talk about that one after. I've actually got a client too in the same space and hit the same issues and having to go to telehealth, and they've been working through those challenges. And part of that was even working to pass legislation to enable it to happen. But they're quickly moving that direction and making it happen so that business continue, and also for the health of their clients, and for their clients, because part of what they do is working with injured workers, and these poor injured workers, their cases are frozen, in that medical legal side of the industry because, they weren't allowed to do telehealth. Well, right. It's really important on multiple levels. And so that business is using this as an opportunity to say, we've been trying to push this direction for years, but now we're able to kind of cross that line and use this as a positive. So I've seen it in a number of different ways. One thing I think is just like you said before, EOS. When everything else is running clean and smooth, you're going to have the time and attention because you're much clearer on your priorities. You know what they are. You've nailed them. Your team is clear on them. And you get better at delegating. You get better at having your own to-dos. So you wake up in the morning and you're not frantic thinking like, shoot, I got this crazy list like to here. And, I talk to people all the time, and I was there before. And I remember like I have my phone reminders and my to-do list over here and this list and these emails I can never get through. And it just was, and then there's 5 new things every single day that you just never felt you could get ahead. We want to stop that. The reason we put this operating system in place is, why are you running your business if that's how you're operating every day? Go work for somebody. This is a miserable life if that's what you want to do. I don't want to ever do that again. And that's where I really got attracted to us, because I want to help other people get outside of that. And it's having the right tools to get there. And then when you do, you can do some pretty awesome things because your mind's going to be free enough to be able to move towards some of those things that you can do. Part of that too, and I love from what's happened with COVID-19 right now, is we've all been able to step over that line in the sand because we had to. And a lot of times we put these mental barriers in place that make it very tough for us. And then we don't execute because we either, that's been kind of a common theme we've been talking about today, is just that decision to execute is a huge gift that we can take away now. And that we've seen that sometimes the fear of it is what holds us back. And so the challenge is, as we leave this time and we get back together again more in person, what can we continue to do in that light? One is be really set up strong so that you can feel that comfort level in making decisions, but also too, that you've let your team weigh in, that it's not all about you. If you're the CEO or you're the boss and you just talk the whole time and you don't truly listen to your team members, what do you think that does to them? I've walked into meetings where, and I've told clients, I'm like, I'm sorry, this isn't going to work. Like, I'm not actually going to take you on as a client because you have to be willing to change. And you have to understand that you have a whole team around you. And if that's not happening, we're not doing EOS together. When you're ready, we can talk again. But I do not want to pick up any client who's stuck there. Yeah. And if you think seriously about yourself and that's where you are, this isn't going to work because it's a team effort. And we have to come in and be able to work together. And that's one other piece that I would mention is, it's not all about this leader who just feels like, I've got to drive this thing forward. You really need to learn how to respect the rest of your team and have them making part of these decisions as well, and giving them the accountability to be able to execute. It's going to free you up and make your life a lot better too.
Yeah. And I think when you have that core values alignment, when you have people who, we haven't talked about get it, want it capacity yet, but when you've evaluated people on the ability for them to get the job, want the job, and have the capacity to do the job, you have a level of trust with your people that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so you can, to use another ism, you can let go of the vine when that trust is established, or you can let go of the control and really trust people to do what they do best, because you have a system, you have the right people in the right seat, and you have a system of accountability, so that you have the visibility, as we were talking about, that you need to know that their stuff's happening to move the business forward. Because any entrepreneur or business owner knows that they can't do it all. And yet I think sometimes entrepreneurialism draws and reinforces this idea of omni competence. Like, there's a lot of business owners that are so good at different areas, jack of all trades, whatever you call it, but they've had to become proficient in A, B, C, D, and E. And that's fine, but they hit a ceiling, and we hit a ceiling at some point. And so to grow beyond that, what got us here is not going to get us there. We have to learn to trust other people and put the right people in the right seat. One of the things that you mentioned a minute ago was that doing all this kind of not only gets you out of the rat race relationship with your own business, but also then gives you the space to be able to kind of lift your eyes up to a broader horizon, to be able to look and engage in the things that really you want to do. I feel like I'm living that right now, even talking with you on this podcast, where this is something I've been thinking and trying to get done in my business for a year. And it just hasn't been happening. And it hasn't been until I got serious about implementing the disciplines around EOS that's freed me up to be able to do this. So I think that's been really, really critical. And just want to give our listeners an opportunity to connect with you. If they want to learn more about EOS, they want to talk with Zack about, my business, or I want to understand, more about EOS, how it can help me here, or just, you have a lot of experience, a lot of business and consulting experience. How can they get a hold of you? How can they learn more?
Sure. Before I say that, I just want to say it just sparked something for me, which I just want to tell everybody, like, it's okay. You don't have to be superhuman. And I think right now, being that leader in a company, you're taking on the weight of the world, and you're not going to be good for you or the company if you just try to do everything and try to do it at that max capacity. We read all the books, we see all the help, we do all the stuff. Mm-hmm. I've been there, and deep down, I feel it, because I've tried to do that. And I know that when I really simplify and focus in on less, I can really be so much more for myself, for my family, for the community, for the business, for the people in the business. And it's been a lifelong challenge for me. And I think in the culture we're in today, we want to push all the stuff because it's all out there.
Yeah.
We need to get better at saying no, that less is more. And it's been one of my personal challenges, and I'm not perfect at it, and I'm struggling and learning every day, but it's definitely paid off a lot. If you want to talk more with me, I love having these talks. I have coffee with people all the time. I talk to college students when they, do things and, talk there. And, I love when people reach out, because for me, I learn just as much every single time I have one of these talks. And if you want to talk about EOS, great. There's great ways to implement, whether you read the book, you self-implement, or you work with an implementer. We have like around 20 implementers in Southern California. I'm more than happy to work with teams if they're interested in working with me, but it's always a fit. And I know all the implementers in the region here, and they're all a bunch of great people. And really, it's about finding that right fit for you, And so when I talk to businesses about what EOS is, I'm like, well, interview me, interview a few others, and, find who's going to be the best fit for you, because that's the most important thing, that your team's going to get along. And this is really going to help drive you forward. And really that relationship is meant to be something where we're coming in and helping you graduate and do it on your own anyway. We're really just looking because we love this. We've done it for ourselves. We've seen the impact in our businesses. If you want to talk more about that, I'm at higherattraction.com. My personal site for executive strategy is swire.red. So I've got two sites, but Swire has the link to the other. If you just go to swire.red, you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm probably the only Zack Swire on LinkedIn, but say hi there. I love connecting with people, and I'm more than happy to make connections here in Southern California locally. Been around the area for a long time, but I'd love to talk with you.
Awesome. Zack, thank you for joining me today, carving time out of your schedule. Really enjoyed our conversation. And I think that everything we've been talking about could be hugely valuable for organizations that are willing to, turn over that stone to see, is there something here? Is there something here for me that can help me get out of where I'm at right now and help me achieve more in my business without taking on the weight of the world? And appreciate your perspective, your vulnerability, and your willingness. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me on. I wish you the best, and I look forward to COVID-19 being over so we can grab some lunch or coffee sometime soon as well.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my interview with Zack Swire and learned about how to create a better business for a better life. Please give it 5 stars, share it with a friend, and join me for episode 5 with Mike Jalanin from Trio Rewards as we talk about their Help First strategy and how businesses and consumers are all in this together. We'll see you then.